Welcome to the Spiritual Principles Made Practical. Today, we're very fortunate to have Lee Balkam with us. He is really adept at turning books into businesses, and he's going to share his wisdom with us. And I know that there are a lot of us that are anxious to learn from you. So, take it away. Tell us about yourself, how you came to do this, and what help you can give the all of us people struggling to turn our books into businesses.
Yeah, Scott, thanks for having me. Actually, I'm kind of the not expected author. I'm dyslexic, and so reading is a chore for me. So the fact that I've got 7 books done and ended up with a PhD is probably more a testament to being stubborn than anything else. Uh, so I finished my PhD and was actually working as a therapist slash coach because after I'd gotten some training, I realized I did coaching anyway. And so I was writing a book and had a guy who said, "What are you going to do with that?" And I said, "Well, I mean, I'm hoping to get it published." And he said, "Okay, well, while you're waiting to get it published, what are you going to do with it?" And he suggested I put it on the internet. Now, this was back in 1998 when he started talking to me about this. 1999, I was finishing it up, and my website went live December of 1999. And I just thought I'd written a book. That was all. And it's kind of like that. I'm done. And then I kind of realized that there was something else I had missed, which is what effect that book might have. And more than that, what do people want from that book? And that has really shaped my career. So as you said, I built my whole business based on that book and then, well, that which became a program that I expanded it. Back in 99, I said ebook because nobody knew what an ebook was, so it's kind of magical. And then all of a sudden, along comes Amazon, who's like, an ebook's 99 cents. And I went, wait, this is an ebook, right? This is part of a program. And so I had to revamp everything and build out from there. Since then, I've been much more strategic about the books and how they feed the business. But that's been the whole thing. I realized that that's the front end, right? That's the starting point. And I'll be honest, I made the mistake that most authors make, which is I wrote the book, I'm done. That was the starting point.
Yeah. Yeah, the I think so many people today, myself included, really want to maximize our contribution to the world, and we really feel, rightly so, everybody, that we all have something of tremendous value to contribute, and we're motivated
Yeah.
to to do that. And most people I know are not satisfied with the impact they're having in the world. They want to have they're doing good, and God bless them for that and all of us, but it's not satisfactory. We want to make a larger contribution, and so
No.
I'm hoping that you can enlighten us.
So, yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I've ended up working with a lot of authors because so now I have, depending on how you count it, I don't even count that first one because now it's part of a program, but I have 7 books that are published and a journal, a couple of journals actually that are published. And so that's put me in proximity to a lot of authors, whether I'm at a conference with authors or I've been to several events with my publisher with other authors there. And what I am most convinced of is what you're talking about, that you don't write a book just because you're bored one day. I mean, that will get you maybe 10 pages in at best, right? And so you have to have a reason to write the book. There is something that is inspiring you. And that inspiration is something you say, this is going to matter, which is why sometimes I'm shocked when I'll say to somebody, one of those authors, so what are you going to do from here? I mean, the book is either done or near done. What are you going to do from here? And they look at me blankly. And that's to me is the sad thing. They put all the energy in, right? They've done the thinking. And while the thinking is not done at the end of a book, there's a lot that, I mean, you've created that piece and yet there's not a through line from there to what's next. Many people will just go, well, I've got another good idea for a book. And that serves a purpose for sure. There is a message there. It just doesn't serve the biggest message, the biggest impact. And so when I'm thinking of these businesses, one of the things I'm aware of is if you've got some clarity, if you've got a message and somebody reads your book and they go, wow, that means something to me. And then the next step is I'll just follow them on Instagram or something like that. There is a missed opportunity both ways. That reader has lost the opportunity of further growth, of further change, because there's no, it's that was the end, right? When they got to the end, it was over, as opposed to somebody who's going, how can I create a business that serves me, but also serves the greater world?
Yeah, and the world needs it, right? I mean, the world needs help um, recognizing and benefiting from this contribution that, so many people want to make. I mean, one of the things when I speak to groups and stuff, because I'm a speaker as well as an author, is I say, the only way to increase your impact in the world is to work on yourself.
Hmm.
And the more that you work on yourself, the greater impact you'll have. And every year I understand more of how that's true and why that's true and such. And um, but it but growth comes from all directions, right? I mean, it comes from other people, it comes from inside, it comes from everywhere.
Sure.
But
Yeah.
uh, go ahead.
So, and your point of working on yourself, and my thing is realizing lots of people need a roadmap to what
Yeah,
they're going to work on, right? And
exactly.
that's what the book starts. It's the roadmap, or at least the start of a roadmap. And so yeah, and so when we've done our own work and have found something that makes a difference, to be able to share that is the incredibly powerful part of a book. And then the question is, how do we make that even a bigger impact? How do we help more people find that path forward?
And what's the answer to that question?
Yeah, so I'll say how I did it myself,
Uh-huh.
and then we can talk about that as kind of a framework for others. I was working as a therapist. I wrote a book about how to improve a relationship. And what I didn't recognize is the multiple ways that might then unwrap for people. Like there are some people who only use my program. That's all they're ever going to do. Some people just are going to read the book. That's it. And for some, they go, wait, I need more help. And
Right.
that led to having more programs, more in-depth programs. That led to coaching opportunities for even I have a team of coaches that do a lot of the work because I can't. It led to me looking at what are the other methods of getting that message out. So I've got a podcast. That podcast allows me to speak to points, which broadens the book and also wraps back around. And there, in many ways, our book is a sorting instrument. You know, there are going to be people who read it and set it aside and either go, I didn't like that, or well, that was nice. And then there are going to be some who say, that spoke to me. You know, what next? If there is no what next, they're in trouble. So it depends on the book. What's the what next? Um, the what next isn't just a well, you know, you're going to do this one thing. It's a broader thing. So you wrote books. You're also a speaker, right? So that speaking is one extension of that message. That speaking also could be a sorting piece, though. The next sorting piece of how does it sort people? What's the next thing for them? All right. There are some people who will keep on following that path because they are ready for more. And I'm also clear that there are some people who get exactly what they need somewhere earlier. Um,
Right.
yeah, I've had people who have listened to one of my podcasts and went, you know, that changed how I interacted and that changed everything. Yeah, it was pretty easy. Then there are people who hire me because they can't get the impact any other way that they want, the changes they want any other way. So it begins to broaden out into it depends on what the framework is in the book. And so sometimes I find that authors feel like they have put everything in the book they can, and that doesn't serve what they thought. Um, Sometimes I think um, if you're trying to explain something complex, chances are that the book isn't going to finish that.
Right. Right.
They can start it though.
Right. So within the book, do you like say a book's already finished, right? And then somebody says, well, gee, I wish I had put in this book. If you have more questions about this, there's support for you here. If you have more questions about this, you can get support here. What do you say to people who say, "Well, gee, I wish I wrote that in. I wish I put that in a book, but I didn't." So I just do a revised issue, or
If they've got control over that, absolutely. All of my books have on the back page some information about me, keying in on what I can help with, not what are my favorite hobbies, but what can I help with, and how to contact me. And those are permanent ways of contacting me. I mean, as permanent as it can be in this world, but permanent ways of contacting me: website, email address, phone number. And so, especially if people are either self-publishing or even a hybrid publishing, that's often an easy thing to get that changed. Traditional publishers, that's a little harder. And that may mean that you go, okay, so how do I strategically do the next book if you need to? But people are pretty good about finding us in the world. So having ways, the next easy step for them to find you is important. I tend to think that they find us better on a website than on Instagram still because we're using handles and all kinds of things. But wherever you like to be, and my other next step is to go, where are my audience? Where are they going to be? And I choose where I interact based on where my ideal audience is going to land. And so then I can increase how they find me based on that.
right.
I reverse engineer from there though. So all of the books after that initial one, I began to go, okay, why? And you made a good point where you said, if you have a thought, I wish I'd said this. My whole program that was the core of my business I mean, it still is, but is augmented by the other pieces. It grew because I would simply go, what do I keep being asked? How do I need to cover that piece? What do I need to expand? And the nice thing about that program is I could start with the ebook that started it. I added audio components to it. I wrote other sections to it, and all of them were basically so that I could get some basics covered that kept repeating themselves and still didn't replace the coaching element. They were the ones that I had to answer by email. Someone say, okay, well, what about this? And it wasn't oh, let's coach on that. It was just a strategic element to this and their work. And so I provided that as bigger piece. It just grew. It just kind of organically grew by listening to feedback. And that also, so I wrote a book on Thrive Principles. And I got enough feedback on that that I went, oh, there's some reasons why people get in trouble. So then I wrote The Immutable Laws of Living based on that. That spurred some people going, yeah, but I can't let go of this. That led to the forgive process. I mean, just stack, stack, stack.
Right.
And it continues to bring people back in on that. And that's the non-relationship piece. That's more the thriving in life piece. But even in the relationship element, the books I've read, so people would say, yeah, but what about an affair? No, I wrote a book on that. We continue to expand based on what we see as our grouping. If I never wanted to deal with that, I could have said, well, I can tell you a few people who deal with that. That's just not my area, right?
Right.
But we're creating the filters for people to come through other ways of finding us.
So, and do you, in your audience that you're trying to reach, are you trying to, um, what do I want to say? I mean, in my mind at least, there's kind of two ways to focus it. One is to continually narrow down your target audience to the people that you can create the most value for yourself and them.
Mhm.
And then the other concept is to, try to make it as broad as possible to serve as many people as possible. And are those two, um, can they coexist well, or do you kind of have to pick one?
Yeah, so the people who I've had this conversation now. Who's your book for? Many authors. Who's your book for? Everyone. Okay, well, that's then for no one. I mean, that's not going to be. It's so general, right? So my books, when I first wrote the first one, it was about saving your marriage. That eliminates all the people who don't want to work on their marriage.
Right.
It eliminates all the people who are just trying to figure out a way of manipulating their spouse because I'm very clear this is not manipulation. This is really trying to restore your relationship. I'm not there to stop your divorce. That was back then, that was the competitor one. And so mine was, how do you actually build a loving, fulfilling relationship? That was the differentiator. So people who wanted a quick, manipulative answer, I filtered them out. People who didn't want to work on the relationship, they're not going to come to save the marriage. I mean, it's an automatic filter. From there, I began to filter down further to, what if you're working all by yourself? So that's not everyone. I'm not going to get everyone, but that creates a place where people can say, I'm having to do this on my own. This is the guy who says he can do it, right? Those who are working with their spouse, that doesn't eliminate them, because I said, even if you're the only one who wants to, but it creates the opening for that further group. Um, I think that is a piece of the puzzle that I've seen of people most effectively these days, is being able to find a fairly narrow group that can hear them. And with the internet, you can get pretty narrow and still be, you know, lots of people out there who would fit that mold, and that's not always been true for authors. We would often worry about getting too narrow because we had only a limited readership you could get to. That's no longer true. We can get to anyone in the world, mostly anyone in the world,
Pretty much.
anyone who would be able to enter into, working with us for sure, we're able to get to. And so finding the band that really truly is your, as Gay Hendricks talks about, your zone of genius. That's an important piece.
Yeah, I think so. You're answering the questions really well. I'm having a hard time coming up with the next question. So for you, what's the future look like for you? What is, I've always felt that um, people are successful because they're lifelong learners and growers.
Hmm.
And so where are you in terms of where are you headed and why are you headed there and what's that all about?
Yeah. So one of the things that I have done for all of these years is work with people in relationships and thriving in life. I don't see that changing. I mean, my one of my core pieces, just like you talked about, is how important curiosity is in the world. We are stuck if we can't be curious about ourselves, about our spouse's interest, about our spouse, period, about what else is possible, about what are the other perspectives. And so one of my core things is curiosity as a driving force. That may be just my own projection that I'm a very curious person, but that's also, I think, a core piece for people. And so for me, that's always going, okay, how can I now serve further? So I've been doing this work with authors on the side, just not talking about it. Now I decided we need to talk about it because in some real ways, I think our culture is getting stuck on a lack of growth. We're watching the stagnation of people who are frozen more and more into their positions and unable to bridge that in any way, in any relationship. And if we can't do that, we are more and more broke. So I think the time is now for people who have a message. And one of the things I realized long ago is we can divide ourselves into speakers and authors and coaches, and we're really talking about messengers, people who have a message that they feel like they have within them and they need to deliver it. It's
Right.
how we're going to. And we are desperate as a world in getting that out more and more. Last year, meaning in December, I saw a statistic that in 2025, the percentage of people who read a single book in the year was less than 40%, single book. And that tells me something about the shifts we're seeing, right? That people are not getting exposed to different things. So doom scrolling on this, which I'm not saying there's not good information out there, because my information is out there, but what you're consuming can be only keeping you in your little bubble. So
Right.
messages are needed to get us out of our bubble.
Right. One of the things that, I sort of believe and focus on is that um, the world is a projection of where I'm at, my perception of the world, right? So if I think of what was my understanding of the world when I was 10
Mm.
versus what is my understanding of the world at 70, that's a really big difference.
I hope so.
Yeah, well, trust me, it is. And and not just the color of my hair. No. Uh, and so, I think that one of the things that when I think about people uh, growing, that my concept is that that means accepting and aligning with what's true at deeper and deeper levels. And
Mm.
there's a lot of, in my mind at least, in my world, and there's a lot of um, power and success in realizing that um, we create everything,
Mm.
and that we're responsible. And like one of the things that I find is that if I come in to see my wife and I'm in a bad mood, that'll get reflected back to me. If I come in to see
Yep.
my wife and I'm in a good mood, that'll get
Yep.
reflected back to
Yeah.
me, right? If I, whatever I do, right? And one of the things that I've really, focused on is the concept of acceptance, and that the more that I accept who I am and where I am and how, my current view of the world, if you will, my world, the more that that acceptance is supportive of other people finding deeper acceptance within themselves, of themselves,
Mm.
wherever they might happen to be.
Hmm.
And I've had some really kind of amazing experiences, even to the extent of like people had like, cathartic releases just because I was in an accepting enough space and they were open enough to it. And so somehow or another, I feel like that if we're going to continue to grow and be happier, healthier, more effective, that somehow or another, uh, a piece of that has to be that we're finding a way to accept and align with what's true more completely.
Which is so, I mean, obviously people can write a book from very different perspectives,
Right, right.
reflecting their own internal, right, reality. And so all of that is true for those messages getting out there. They're going to find their audience for sure. So I was years ago, I worked as a chaplain in a hospital back in the late 80s. And Kubler-Ross's work on grief was one of the big ones. And I realized the doctors would come to me and say, these people are in denial. You've got to get them to acceptance. And so as you were saying that, I was sitting there going, yeah, because what they meant by acceptance was really resignation.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
okay, I guess I
Yeah.
just have to suck it up. And what I saw was that this was the doctor's discomfort with the fact that these people were dealing with probably the worst news they could hear as a family, and definitely for that individual many times. And so they wanted me to basically come in and get them to just go, there's nothing that could be done. We'll just accept this. That was their acceptance. I realized acceptance was seeing where things were as they are currently. That's the place where we are, and then asking the question, so now from here, what? Right? That's the big question. So I often talk about the fact that acceptance is kind of like when you open up the map on your phone to go somewhere and you're like, I don't like where the starting point for this. I'd rather not start. So if I'm going to go to the beach, I'm like, I don't want to have to travel that far to the beach. So, I want to be 5 hours closer. Well, you're not. I mean, that's not reality. And so to be able to go, okay, this is where I am. Now, how do I get there? That's what acceptance really, really is like for people to accept that this is where things are. Things are the way they are. Now what? That's where I kind of hear that message, and the same place a starting point for an author is, okay, this is where things are. This is where my audience is. Now what's possible to get to a better place? What's that?
Yeah.
Where does that lead?
One of the things that I found is that the more articulate I can be in accepting where I am right now, the clearer the path forward becomes. It becomes,
Hmm.
oh, this is the obvious next thing to do here. So,
Hmm.
yeah, and I mean, and I don't think I'm always try to make a point to say acceptance isn't complacency. Part of accepting is accepting the fact that you can change things and make it better.
Yeah. Yeah. You can make a choice from here.
Yeah,
That's, I always think about Jack Canfield talking about response ability. We have the ability to respond, but you have to be aware of where you are before you can choose your response that's going to make a difference.
right, right. And is that a challenge with your clientele or not really?
I think it's a challenge of humans. So I often get people who are they're rarely stuck in the everything's okay. They're not looking to save their marriage when everything's okay. But sometimes they're almost at the point of going, nothing can be done, which is the other end of this, right? That is the resignation to give up instead of going, what can be done? So I'm trying to shift people. Same with authors. Now I've got a book. It's not selling the way I want it to. What do I do here? Let's talk about what's in there that's possible. What is this? What's this the beginning point for building? How are you the architect of where you want to go from here rather than thinking all done? I've turned it over. That has always been an interesting thing for me for the author thing to go, okay, book's finished, I'm done. And I'm like, book's finished, you just started. I mean, book writing of it. I used to say it was the first 20%. Well, now I've been doing it so long, and I'm like, that's 2%, 5%.
Yeah.
It's not much of it because this journey has carried me now for what um, for my career 30 years. But since I published that book, it's carried me for 27 years. And it continues. So 27 years, and I wrote the book in I don't know 6, 8 months. So I can't do the math, but it's a small percentage of what it was about. And I do this day in and day out. And that book was what I was writing outside of my actual job.
So you said that, where the direction you're moving now is to be more supportive of authors. And so if how does that process come? If I come to you and say, "Okay, I got this book. I don't know what to do with it. I know there's something to do with it. I don't know what that something is. Help me."
Yeah.
What do
So
you, then what happens?
my suggestion for every author is you do one thing at a time. My observation is that there are plenty of programs that give you everything to do all at once and nothing happens. Zero happens. You've written the book, you've already done a lot of the lifting. And so then the next question is how do we build this a piece by piece it out? And that's kind of what um, the book to business blueprint is designed to get people to take one action at a time, not a huge like everything action, one action at a time, just for clarity's sake. So same as that, the GPS of here I am, where do I go from here? Well, I can't go in every direction all at once. I'm going to have to pick where do I go next? What's my next destination? And if we don't do that, we never take the trip. If all we're doing is going, oh my gosh, it's a 20-hour trip and I got to get gas and I got to pack and I got, on and on the list goes instead of going, what's the next one thing I do that moves this ahead? The overwhelm that I watch with authors, when I begin to talk with them for years, I would go, oh, let's do this plan. And then I would come back and say, how'd it go? And nothing had happened. No shift had happened because it's so overwhelming. And so I've had this conversation even with some fiction writers where they go, there's no business in the book. I'm like, if it could hold a book, there's got enough in there to build something out. You may be so blind to it because it's all you're engrossed in. You're too close, but just with a step back, let's talk about what are the next steps or what is the next step and then what is the next step and then what is the next step that starts to build that out. That was my mistake when looking back, I wish I had known that, but I tried to do everything and nothing was working until I went, let's do one thing. How can I add one thing in? And now we've got multiple pieces. And so a lot of times people will look and go, gosh, you've got all these things. That's not where it started. It started out as one piece. And that one piece, I kept growing until, and I would follow that until it was set. And then we would add another piece. And the same is true for, I think, for most people who build that kind of that expertise market, that expertise business, they have to do that same thing.
So would the first step be identifying your target audience or something else?
So you probably have in some ways identified it in the book. And so it is
That
looking at
makes
the
sense.
book
Yeah.
going,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Otherwise, you wouldn't have written the message. But to step back and go, who's this going to resonate with? Yeah, if you haven't done that in the writing process, that is important. If you've gone through a typical publishing process, you've already identified that in some ways because that's the publisher's going to ask for it, or you're going to have to figure it out because you're going to do some pieces. You've already got that piece. The next thing is to say, what's the next thing they're going to need after this book, though? I mean, that really is the what's next. Some books, it's all about speaking. You've got a message, and it's going to resonate, and you're going to be able to pull speaking from that. And then the next question is, what's after that? What does the speaking allow for? What does it broaden into? For some people, they may say, "Oh, I can start a newsletter off that." So the next small thing is the next place you can engage with that reader to
Right.
move them further along.
Right.
The what I have long realized is the book is not to sell. The book is to filter and bring them in. And then you continue the process until they trust you enough that you can make a suggestion.
Right. Right.
So that has led to the 7 books, and the one that's in process now is a continuation of that. Is I just keep finding the books are a way. I mean, and people ask me why I write them. The first part of authority is author. So that tells me that in our history, that has been the task. It's not the only way, though. That's just the good starting point, and authors have already embraced that. So we take that further.
I'm running dry on questions.
So we got it all covered, right? One of the things that I think people do need to be, or authors do need to be clear about is the work that went into that, the transformation that happens for an author means that you are ready to take that further. You're further ahead. I mean, that's one of the things. This was back in grad school. And often in grad school, the whole point is to bring these two things that aren't so clearly related and relate them. I mean, that was you're trying to find these connections, which, by the way, is what most authors are doing. You're bringing in connections and revealing these connections. And one of my professors said, you realize that by the time you finish this paper, you will be the world's foremost authority on what you're doing, what you're talking about. And I remember sitting there going, that can't be true. But I realized it was true because I was putting something together that nobody else had put together my way. So of course I'm the foremost authority on that. Well, that is true for authors and ideas. You're the foremost authority on the idea that you've brought forth in that book. Even if you are just kind of bringing stuff together, the way you're bringing it together, the voice you bring to that, the approach you bring to that, that's yours. And that's what builds your business, not a business, not the business, which is kind of hard to, it makes it hard to make it in the abstract. When I'm talking to somebody and they can tell me what they've got, then it's easier for us to follow the path. But there are some things just in the abstract that you can do one step at a time, that it doesn't matter what your message was, it will fit within that framework. And that's what we try to create with the Book to Business Blueprint. It just next step. What's next step? What's the next step? And you take those steps, and then suddenly you go, oh, that's what I've created. You don't always know where it's going to lead. I can tell you, this is not where I imagined 27 years ago that it would be. And here I am with something that I love. It feeds what I think is important. seems to strike a note with those who come into that. And that's, I mean, can you ask for more for that in life? I mean, just to be living what your message is about and
No,
feeling like
that's it.
others are doing better, right?
That's it. That's the whole ball of wax.
Yeah. If you find your meaning and purpose, I think everything else clicks into place. And that's so that's the sad part for me is many times an author will do the work. And just when they're ready for it to launch into something bigger, they don't know what the bigger is. They're stuck on, well, I thought I did that with the book. You know, that's just the next piece, and the next piece is after that.
Interesting. Well, I'm thinking about it, in terms of, my own experience and stuff and so on. And um, and as I reflect, I mean, I can appreciate that, I do have a unique point of view and that um I'm going to give more thought to um who would be interested in that and how to reach them
Yeah.
more clearly because it's a relatively small group. I mean it's in terms of people, well, I don't know, maybe not, I mean in terms of people that feel that they have a message that's globally uplifting and that it's their calling in life to share that message and share that, and so I don't know. It's not everybody by a long shot, but but there's a fair amount of people I think that fit that criteria.
But isn't that often the case where you're looking for what's the small group that can then begin to filter it out further? That's to me is how any transformation starts with some message. I mean, if we go back to the beginnings of most spiritual disciplines, a person had
Right,
some thinking, taught to some people, who taught some people, who taught some people,
right,
until it's gained a foothold. So where it starts, that's that's just the beginning point. Where
right,
it can expand to is what you're looking. How much can that message transform? And we have this is kind of my hope for authors. We have plenty of bad expansions going out there, of where not so healthy, helpful, loving actions are in the world, and they keep getting a foothold. We need an antidote to that. Those are the
right,
positive messages that can just as easily fight that back and bring us to our higher points of humanity rather than reducing us to our lower points. That to me is what the people I've met as authors tend to be. I haven't met any that I went, "Ooh, your message scares me." They're doing that in their own little corner of the world, I'm sure. But the ones that amaze me are the ones. I told this story before. I was at an authors conference, and it was in Vegas. I don't have anything naturally against Vegas, but they make you go, we're in a hotel, big hotels, nice place, but every hall went through the casino. And I know
by,
why.
by design.
By design, if I'm staying here and I want to go eat through the casino, want to go to the meeting rooms through the casino, want to go to the gym through the casino. Everything was through the casino. And so our meeting rooms for this author get together was on the other side of the casino. And so I'd have to pass through it multiple times a day. And I was walking through and I'm staring at, but I'm not a gambler. So I'm not nothing about that. I went, ooh, let me get in there. But I'm watching people and darkened rooms. So I'd go from these bright rooms out there to this darkened room that had no time to it, no clocks in there.
Oh
It
yeah.
could be that same thing 24 hours a day. And I'm walking by people who had a drink and then a drink and a cigarette or a cigar in one hand. And they were just, you don't have to pull anymore. You just junk, junk, right? And I looked and they were just there. And so I walk into this room where these authors were just buzzing with electricity, excited about what's possible with their book, excited to learn what to do next with the book, excited to how do I finish this, all of that stuff. And so I came in, I sat down by this guy that I'd gotten to know down there, and I turned to him. He said, "You look funny." I said, "Do you believe in zombies?" And he said, "What are you talking about?" I said, "Do you believe in zombies?" And he said, "No, why?" And I said, "Because I just walked through a room full of them. And I come in here and it's like this oasis of aliveness."
Yeah.
And later on, I went to the person who had started there, and I said, "You've got the wrong locations for this." And I told him my experience. He never went back to Vegas after that. He said, "You're right. It's a mismatch. You know that what we're talking about is being alive with your message,
Right.
not being caught with multiple addictions going on at one time." And but that counterpoint, authors are bringing life into the world, not getting people stuck here. They're bringing life into the world. And if we can find ways of making that our lives, our businesses, our livelihood, then we're bringing something into the world that not many others are doing. And that's the opportunity for the authors who are ready to make that next step.
Yeah, I mean, I can't go through a day listening to the television without, saying, look, and I really, every chance I get, I try to share this, and so I'm going to do it here. And that is that the only power that satisfies is power over ourself. If Hitler had
Mm,
taken over the entire world, that would not have been enough for him. That would not have satisfied his need. So if you feel a need for power and you think that, being a dictator, an authoritarian, or manipulating people by money or in any other way, um, uh, forcing or manipulating people into behaving a certain way to try to satisfy your need for power, it's never going to work. Give it up
mm,
and work on the ultimate power, which is to be aware of your thoughts and the fact that you have a choice on which thoughts to act on, and that you can create a wonderful world if you choose to act on thoughts that do that. And that's where real power lies.
mhm,
And the other thing that I repeat almost every chance I get is that the most effective form of leadership is an example. Be an example of, being good. And it's I don't know, I mean, so much of um, what I'm inspired to do, it just has a global context,
mhm.
like that, and I think, and one of the things that I'm really, like I say, I take every chance to say it I can is that the only power that satisfies is power over yourself. And once you have power over yourself, you'll be the kind of person that other people will want to emulate.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's the impact you'll have in the world is people wanting to emulate your example.
But Scott, you just named your message very clearly right there.
Say it back.
And that the only thing that will satisfy you is mastery of yourself, not mastery of others, right? That is your core message.
Right.
And so anything you would do that would help people understand how to do that is the next step for them. That's the framework of it. How do I do a framework that people can follow? Because I mean, my wife will always say, "You love, I've my three C's and, my four A's and all these other things." And I'm like, it's because that's the only way we remember frameworks. In the midst of trying to change, we need a framework that we can almost plug and play because we're all running on systems all the time. And those systems either serve us or hold us back. Your difference between the self-serving system and the domination system and the self-mastery system, those are two very different systems. But a lot of times I'll say to somebody, "We need to look at your system." They'll go, "I don't have a system," and I'll respond, "That
Everybody.
is a system. It's just not a good one, right? It's not intentional." So we need to figure out a better, more intentional one. And yours is simply that system in place is not about manipulation and is not about power plays over people, but understanding your own personal power and your own personal place of control. That's the framework. That's the beginning of the framework. And then I'm sure when you're speaking on that, create more of a framework for people to go, oh, okay, I see how I might be able to take the next step. When you build a business on that message, you're just saying, so what's the next step? And how can people learn to do that? And how can people move into that more strongly? That's the whole process.
Yeah, because it's interesting because when I talk about being myself and everything, a lot of people go, well, I don't know what that means to be myself, and it's like, okay, you know, maybe you need some help with that, and just and recognizing who you are.
And an author with the business will go, maybe you need some help with that. Here are some possibilities for you.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's how it builds out. And you're not doing anything to take advantage. You're doing something to bring that message to a broader audience. In some ways, I think that if you've got a message and you don't allow people to learn more about that and how to step into that, you're doing a disservice to that reader, to the world, and to yourself.
I agree with that. I absolutely agree with that. Um, I've always had some reticence about promoting myself, and I need to. I've been chipping away at it, but I feel like acknowledging that it's a disservice to the world to uh, not to share and promote what I can help with.
Well, and you're what you're promoting more than yourself is your message.
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
And
That's
if you bring that out, and if you're truly promoting yourself, the danger is to the ego, right? That your ego can get pulled into that. If
yeah.
you're clear about what your message is and what that message could do,
Yeah.
then you see more of the responsibility to bring that to the public. That is not about feeding the ego. It's about wanting to make a difference. So I had somebody said, "What do you want your legacy to be?" And I'm like, "My name is going to be forgotten. I don't care. It doesn't matter." I hope that people have tools and strengths that they take from what I've said that will impact themselves, their children, future generations. I hope I'll leave the world a better place, but I don't need to be remembered. I,
Right.
that's I don't need my name on a wall. I don't need my name on a building. I've I've got some books, sure, and my kids can hold them up and go, "Hey, or my dad did this," and that's about all it's going to matter when I'm no longer around. But if I brought some message more strongly into the world, that's a legacy I can live with.
Yeah. No, I'm definitely with that, leave the world better off. But as I said a couple of times, I'm out of questions. So we can either wrap this up, or if you've got more that you'd like to say, floor is yours.
Well, I mean, I think if this has been something that sounds like somebody's written a book and they're like, I don't know what the next step is. Next step might be to visit me at Book to Blueprint Business. I'm sorry, Book to businessblueprint.com, booktobusinessblueprint.com. And there's article there you can read. A couple, I've even got a podcast I started just about my experience. So visit me there, booktobusinessblueprint.com.
All right. And for me, if you're really wanting to grow in your acceptance of yourself and your power that comes from accepting and relating to yourself more, and you're interested in coaching in that regard, you can reach me at scottfriedman40@gmail.com. So it's up there on the screen, and I'd be honored to work with you, because I'll tell you that the more examples that people see of you thriving because you're working on yourself, the more it's going to inspire other people to do that, and that will change the world for the better. So that's my 2 cents.
Good 2 cents.
All right. So that will do it.